So I'm being asked during this whole crisis thing a lot. What would libertarians do? And get a lot of flack back for my answer. So I want to get a little bit more into detail about what the libertarian approach to this pandemic would have been, as far as I know. Now, other libertarians have differing philosophies and how deep we get into libertarianism, and we have different ways of thinking. Now, this is my version of libertarianism and how I think it would have been handled, or should have been handled in a libertarian. So let's go over how it's been handled so far. So that the government has basically taken control of the situation, stood up like daddy and said, this is what we're going to do. This is how it's going to be handled. I control everything. I'm going to control the economy. I'm going to control the hospitals. I'm going to control your civil liberties and your freedoms and your freedom of movement. I'm taking control, and that's it. And it so far it hasn't worked very well at all. If anything, it's probably backfired in a lot of cases. The FDA regulating companies that are trying to release test kits, companies that are threatening to violate federal law just to get test kits out to the hospital so more people can be tested. Further crackdown, we got social distancing laws now, not recommendations, but laws saying that you have to stay 6 feet away from people. Now we got curfews going up around the country. You can't go out after 11 p.m. A grown adult can't be walking the street after 11 p.m. in Tampa, Florida. We have, here in El Paso, we have the parks and recreation centers are off limits. You can't have private gatherings anymore. This is ridiculous. That you can be fined. I have a friend who's walking his dog by himself, not threatening anybody with possible infection. Now has a citation with up to a possible $1,000 fine for walking his dog. The problem is anytime the government gets involved, because the government's entire power base is based on the use of force. So anytime the government gets involved, they're going to force their will on people, and usually by force, nothing good ever comes of it. I mean, I would wish somebody would just tell me something that the government has forced its will upon that actually shows. We have all these negative things that are coming out because the government has gotten its hands in it. And we have Democrats and Republicans finally coming together in agreement, right? An agreement on a $2.2 trillion spending bill that maybe has $5 billion in it that's going to help the average citizen, whether it's through unemployment, through business loans or grants, and then our rebate checks. These things, this is what they can't. While we have $5 billion that are coming to us, the government is funding itself with $2.195 trillion worth of spending. I want to say one thing though. One person stood up against that bill, that stood up for the Constitution. Congressman Thomas Massey out of Kentucky. That guy's an American hero. I'll just say that right now. I don't care if anybody agrees or disagrees. That guy's a hero. Because when it comes down to it, when this bill ends up coming back to us and we have to pay the price for it, we're going to look for accountability, and nobody has voted on it. That's what Thomas Massey wanted, was a vote, so that our legislators could be held accountable for whether they agreed or disagreed with it when it finally comes due to time to pay for it. I get told a lot. All we really need is more bipartisanship in Washington. What do we need bipartisanship for? The Democrats and the Republicans are exactly the same. They want more spending. They want more taxes. They want to continue these endless wars around the world that have no other purpose but to serve their own political gain. They're the same. I mean, they may disagree on some macro policies or some micro policies, but they agree on macro government, growing the size of government, more government power, more spending, more debt, more endless wars. They're the same. The Libertarian Party. We want to shrink the size of government. That's our entire platform. Shrinking the size of government, giving more power back to the people, less power to the politicians that are corrupt. But as an institution, it's designed to be corrupt because its only power is through the use of force. So how would libertarians have handled this? I mean, they wouldn't have locked down the country and shut down the economy. They would have done advisories. They would have been plenty of recommendations. They would have deregulated industry in order to allow the free movement of property and test kits and innovation and stuff, release the reins of industry in order to make things better. It's not, so really the only people that are being hurt by this, as usual, by government are the innocent people. The people who will listen are the only ones. And I would have listened if it would have been a recommendation rather than a law. So the people that wouldn't listen to it as a recommendation are not going to listen to it as a law either. Meanwhile, you have private industry like FedEx that are still working, like McDonald's that are still working, like grocery stores that are still working, postal workers are still working, and they're doing all of these precautions that other businesses would have done as well. And I don't see massive amounts of infections amongst them. You know, we have Albertsons putting up plexiglass barriers between the cashiers and the customers. The law didn't require that, but they did it as a protective measure because that's what people do. I know a lot of people believe that less control would have ended up in more deaths. It's sad. People are going to die from this. People are going to get sick from this. It's a horrible thing that's going to happen, and it's still going to. It would have happened whether the government took control or not. But the fact, I fear for the people right now that have lost their jobs, and people identify themselves by the job that they have, by their employment, by their ability to provide for their families, and now they've lost that ability. They see their future as bleak. You know, during the 2008 recession that we had, a small recession, 5,000 suicides directly related to the economy, and this is looking like it's going to be 100 times worse than that economic disaster. What about those lives? And those lives are directly because of government's intervention in the free market and the businesses and shutting down the economy. At least in a libertarian way, there would have been freedom for people to still go to work, to still have the precautions could have been put in place voluntarily and still go to work. People that could work from home would work from home just like they're doing now, just without government intervention, forcing those issues upon people. So many organizations have stepped up and done the right thing above and beyond what the government has asked them to do. And yet, here we are. In closing, just ask yourself, who do you trust more? Yourself, your neighbors, your local businesses, or your government? And what do you want more? Do you want more freedom and liberty to make choices yourself? Or do you want to be controlled? Just ask yourself that. And vote both.
It's very different now. For man holds in his mortal hand the power to abolish all forms of human poverty and all forms of human life. And yet the same revolutionary belief for which our forebears fought are still at issue around the globe. The belief that the rights of man come not from the generosity of the state, but from the hand of God.